It is so good to be with you tonight. My name is Josh, and this is Dwell Live, the Dwell Youth Ministry, which is a youth ministry of First Congregational United Church of Christ in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I am so excited and glad to be with you today. You are welcome here. No matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter who you love, no matter what you've done, no matter how you identify, you are welcome here. This is a space where love is love, where Black Lives Matter, and that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness and respect. So tonight we're going to do something a little different. I want this to be a space for you and about you. And by you, I mean all of you students out there, middle and high school students. This is a space designed for you. And so tonight I'm going to be answering a question that was submitted anonymously to me, and I want to address it because one of my rules that I have for myself is that every sincere and honest question deserves a sincere and honest answer. So no matter what you ask, if you ask it with sincerity and honesty, I require of myself to respond in sincerity and honesty. So that's what we're doing tonight. And I want to give you all the opportunity to submit your own questions as well, either anonymously or not. If you don't want it to be anonymous, then you can just send me an email at josh@fcucc.org. If you want to do it anonymously, then I will provide a link later on the social media channels, including Instagram here. I'll provide it in the comments of YouTube for you to submit those questions anonymously, because I want to treat your questions respectfully and kindly, because you all have great questions. My answers may or may not be great, but I'm going to do what I can to respond the best way that I possibly can. So let's go ahead and dive into tonight's question. You ready? This is a long one, by the way. Someone asked, what is the significance of the two law books, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, to our faith today? They are clearly obsolete as legal or moral guides. Should they be kept and studied for historical context? Is there some strand of esoteric wisdom or beauty stenographically concealed? Sorry, struggle with some words. Are they only there for posterity's sake because they've been there for so long? Should they, as I have heard suggested, be removed from the Bible? Okay, that is a huge question. It's a loaded question that is so much there to talk about. But it's your question, and I want to answer it. So I'm going to do it the best that I can. Disclaimer, I am not a biblical scholar, so this isn't necessarily up my road of expertise. Hey, it's good to see you too, Matt. By the way, if you all comment live, I can see those comments. So feel free to comment, we can interact. If you have any questions during this, feel free to type those into the chats and I'll respond. But back to tonight's question. What do we do with Leviticus and Deuteronomy? Which, for those of you that don't know, they are two books in what is commonly known as the Old Testament, although I don't like that phrase. I call it either the Hebrew or Jewish scriptures. And Leviticus and Deuteronomy are located there towards the beginning. They are the fourth and fifth books, respectively, in the Jewish scriptures. And they are two of the five books that make up what is commonly known as the Pentateuch, or the books of the law. So what do we do with those two books? That's a great question. It's such a great question because, yeah, they can be a little troublesome. They're a little weird to read, but I think they're important. But before we get to what we do with them, we should probably begin with some sort of foundation. Let's talk about the relationship between Christianity and Judaism. It's had a fraught history, but they've been woven together for the last 2,000 years in some capacity. Because in the beginning of Christianity, it was a Jewish sect. Sect meaning like it was just a part of Judaism, but like a different kind of tradition. And for the first few decades, that's what it was. Christianity was Judaism. It was just people who were following the teaching specifically of the Rabbi Jesus. And so for the first few decades, there was no real difference between Christianity and Judaism besides some ideas were different. But there's always been a diversity of ideas within the Jewish faith. Still to today, it is not a monolithic religion. It's diverse, just like Christianity is. But after a few decades, Christianity branched off of Judaism because there were some significant social and political things that were happening that caused them to split. There were some religious things as well. We don't have time to go into that tonight. That can be a topic for another conversation if you ask the question. But they pretty quickly diverge from one another, although they've always been connected because over the last 2,000 years, they've not gotten along very well, the two communities, the Jewish community and the Christian community. Things like the Crusades were not just about Christians fighting against Muslims. No. On the way to the quote-unquote Holy Land, Christian crusaders also slaughtered Jewish communities. Think of the Holocaust. The Holocaust was possibly the greatest tragedy to happen on this earth, to destroy countless lives, specifically Jewish lives. And Christians did that. It's been a hard history between the two. Hopefully there's a better future, right? Because people of all faiths deserve respect and kindness because they are pursuing the divine the best way they know how. The same as for us. But it has been a pretty terrible history between the Christians and the Jews. Which is why when we start to look at some of the Jewish scriptures and start to critique it, there's some baggage there, you know? It's not as easy as thinking that Leviticus and Deuteronomy are Christian books, because we can critique our own selves just fine, and that's okay, and we should critique ourselves. But when we begin to critique the property of another faith, it gets a little tricky. Not that we can't critique, but we have to be careful. We should also kind of learn how the Bible itself was formed, because it's not just a book that popped out of nowhere. No, it was created over the course of thousands of years. So it's a collection of writings that began with the Hebrews who traveled around the land of Israel. And over the couple thousand years, they started to form their own writings, which make up the Jewish scriptures. They were formed over a pretty long period of time, the law and the prophets and other writings. So you have the Pentateuch, You have things like the Psalms, and then the prophets writing. Those all belong to the Jewish scriptures. By the time Jesus came around, the scriptures were pretty set for the Jewish scriptures. But then Jesus came, and with Jesus came this divergent community, this new kind of community that began to write their own things. So over the first 100 or so years AD, Christians were writing their own things. And they were writing letters to each other, and they were being circulated between all kinds of different communities, different churches around the Roman Empire. And so they began to circulate their own writings. And those writings were used to, in worship and in learning about Jesus and what Jesus wanted. Over the course of time, some of these writings were used more often than others. These writings kept circulating until eventually they became canon, C-A-N-O-N, meaning this is what is Scripture. And the first time that a canon was decided was in 397 AD. Yeah, almost 400 years after Jesus walked the earth. That's when the biblical canon was first set in place. Although there were some different books in there than we have now, because over the last 1600 years after that, we've continued to tweak and change things to decide what is canon. And so in a Protestant Bible versus a Catholic Bible, there are different books. The Catholic Bible has more books. And that's how the Bible was formed. People decided what was to be kept in the scriptures. What was the Jewish scriptures and what was the Christian scriptures. And that's how the Bible was formed. And so that's how we get to now how we're dealing with Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Because there are certainly issues that we face when we talk about these books. How do they impact us today? The person who asked the question said they are clearly obsolete as legal or moral guides. I don't know if that's necessarily true. There are some things that we don't do, such as animal sacrifices, ritual cleaning. We don't build our churches after the temple blueprint that is provided there. It's different. There's things there that we don't do. Clearly, they were done at some point in the past. And even some Jewish traditions still today follow as closely as they can the rules and regulations and guidelines that they find in these books. Although most don't. Like I said earlier, there is a great diversity within Judaism. So not all of them take these books literally. They don't they don't do animal sacrifices. They don't do the ritual cleanings of themselves. They left that in the past. So why do we include them? Why are those books there? Are they important? Are they obsolete, like the person who asked the question kind of puts forth? Well, first of all, there's many ways to handle the Bible. The Bible is a complicated book. The book has, like I said, formed over a few thousand years. We can handle it. It's one of like three major ways. And that is to take the words literally, to take them figuratively, or to simply ignore them. Often it's a combination of any or all of those. And so if you take them literally and you want to follow the Bible strictly, then Leviticus and Deuteronomy, you got to do all those things. But I assume that's not a thing that you want to do, because some of those things are outdated, let's say. So if we want to take the Bible seriously, maybe not literally, but seriously, then we have to seek to understand what the authors were intending and who the audience was. So asking the question, why did the authors write these books? For what purpose were these written? Because trying to force the Bible into what it's not is harmful. We've tried to do that in the past, and it's ended up with devastating consequences. So what do we do with the Bible? How do we handle it? I think, this is what I think, at least, when I read Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I don't take them literally. I'm not going to read them and follow them as a law or moral guideline. But I look at these books as written for a purpose, that they were written for a community of people that had just left slavery. They didn't really have a society of their own. So they had to make it. They had to make and create their society that was torn apart by slavery in Egypt. So that's part of what these books are doing. They're helping to create a society, just like our Constitution kind of does, to create this society in the United States. I think this is also part of what it's doing. It was also written by people who were truly trying to understand who God was and what their relationship to the divine was. How were they to relate to a God that they claimed rescued them from slavery? And that's complicated. We haven't figured out exactly what to do in our relationship with God. It's not cut and dry. It's complicated, and it was complicated for them too. So they were doing their best, and that's what some of these things in those books are for, to help create rituals and practices that help them to relate to God. And in so doing, they created a sacred space, because spaces in this world are indeed sacred if we make them so. And so in their attempt to have a temple blueprint, they were trying their best to make a space in itself holy. Just like when you come into a church, you get this sense of reverence and awe. Similar sort of thing. So what we can attempt to get out of these two books, first of all, we're reading someone else's experience. It's not just about our own experiences. Learning from someone else's experience, even those who lived thousands of years ago, can provide wisdom for us today. We can learn from someone else, even if they seem a little outdated and a little weird, or very weird in some cases. I think we can still glean some sort of wisdom from them and learn from somebody else. We can understand that humans have always tried to relate to the divine, that we're not the first ones to begin that journey, that people have gone before us. And we're only here today because of those who have gone before us. We can also glean from these two books that space is sacred, that we can create a safe space where everyone belongs, where everyone can be loved and be treated with kindness and respect. That's good, right? And then just like the community in Leviticus and Deuteronomy were trying to do, they were trying to reason that God dwells among them. And I think that same way. I think that the divine dwells here with us, in and through us. And so, why are these two books included? Because I think we can learn from them. I don't think we need to follow them as rules or guidelines necessarily, but we can learn from the experiences and wisdom of others. So, to answer the last part of this question, should they, as I have heard suggested, be removed from the Bible? No. First of all, they're not our books. They're not our writings. They belong first and foremost to the Jewish community. So we must respect that and respect our relationship to that. And then learn what we can to try to find God in the mess, in the weirdness. Can we find wisdom and can we find divine? I think so. So those are my thoughts on Leviticus and Deuteronomy. I hope that's helpful. I hope that answered your question. If not, we can talk and chat about it sometime, some other time. But for now, I really want you to know, because I think everyone deserves to know this, that you are loved, that you are important, and that you matter. This world is a better place because of you. So thank you for being here. You're amazing. All right. I love you all. Have a good night.